Hello, this is Tommy Diedrich, and this is my interview with Mimi Diedrich about the Cold War. So, hello, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
That's good. So, I'd like to ask you some questions about the Cold War. And I was wondering, so what is your earliest memory about the Cold War?
I probably didn't realize it was being called the Cold War, but when I was 4, we lived on an Air Force base, and my dad was in the Air Force, and that was 1964 to 1968.
Wow.
And the men who were in the Air Force were fighting in Vietnam, so all of my friends who lived on the Air Force base with us, their dads were serving in Vietnam. My dad wasn't stationed in Vietnam, and he was stationed in New York. We were in upstate New York. But he wasn't allowed to fly because I think he had hay fever or something, so he wasn't allowed to go and be a fighter pilot.
But he was in the military?
But he was in the Air Force. He was a captain.
Wow. That's cool.
So anyway, I remember that the war was going on, and I remember they talked about it in school, and I remember a lot of our friends' dads were missing in action, or prisoners of war.
Yeah, I heard that was tough to have a dad in the war. Was it tough?
I felt bad for my friends. My friends wouldn't see their dads for almost like a year at a time, and then they'd come back for a few weeks, and then they never knew if they would see them again when they left again.
Wow.
My best friend had a dad, her dad was missing in action, and she had 4 little sisters, and her mom was expecting a baby, and they had just found out he was missing, and they didn't know where he was. That was kind of sad.
Yeah. So to me, that time period of like the Cold War period kind of seemed like I don't know, kind of like a dark time period to me. Did it seem like that to you?
I guess it seemed like there was a little bit of scary tint to it, but normal. We had, we were just kids, so we had a normal everyday life, go to school, play. But we did do air raid drills. We did get under our desks when we were in kindergarten and 1st grade. So that we did, maybe because we were on an Air Force base, or I don't know if everyone did that, but we just, and then everything was fine again. We just didn't talk about it that much because we were just kids. But I do remember that there, there's a little bit of
People
tension.
were on edge.
Yeah,
a little bit. Just because of like the Russian arms race and like the atomic bomb.
I don't know exactly when I was aware of all that, because like I said, I was born in 1960, so I just remember the Vietnam War going on mostly while I was in school.
So, do you remember JFK at all?
I remember when we lived on the Air Force, let's see, no, we weren't on the Air Force base. We lived in Kansas. It was before I was 4. It was in 1963. We lived in Kansas, and we had a black and white TV. And I remember that the TV was on, and the news was playing, and everyone was quiet and sitting around the TV and very serious and crying, quietly that our president had been shot. So I just remember it was really sad that I was very little, but I do remember that.
That's crazy. Like, you say you didn't really know what was going on though?
Not really, because, I didn't sit there and sit with them for a long time. I just kind of saw what was going on, and I went off and did my own thing.
Yeah.
But
That's kind of how I feel about 9/11. Like, I didn't really know what was going on, but I definitely knew that was like a serious thing going on.
Right, but kids probably don't understand everything that's going on.
Yeah. So a question that my U.S. history teacher asked us is, if we were during the time period of the Vietnam War, would we go? And so we had to pick a side of whether we would go or not. And so I'd like to ask you, if you had a son during the time of the Vietnam War and he was drafted, would you let him go?
I certainly wouldn't want him to go, but I think that as an adult it would have to be his decision. But if he asked me my opinion, I would say I really would rather that you went to college, went to school, and then if you still felt the same way, that you could go, because I think if you went to college you could get a deferment, and then he still felt the same way, then I guess I would have to say, that's his decision, but.
Because you don't think he should help out his country and he should put his education first?
I feel like in any war, I wouldn't want my sons to go. And I think that when politicians declare war, I think they should be the first ones to send their sons to go. And if that's how strongly they feel about it, if they feel strongly enough that they would send their own sons, okay, then maybe there must be a, maybe a real legitimate reason. But it sometimes makes you wonder, is it such a legitimate reason that it's worth sending my son?
Yeah, that's a good point. And then, so during the Vietnam War, do you think Richard Nixon handled the war properly when he went into office after Lyndon B. Johnson?
Again, I was really young, and so since we were in the military, from the time I was 4 till the time I was 8, and that wasn't him yet, right? I think that was still Johnson, Kennedy, then Johnson. But I know that Johnson was coming under a lot of attack for how he was handling the war. And I know that there was a lot of pressure on Nixon to end the war, and I do remember that. I was getting older then. I think I was probably like a young teenager. And I do remember a lot of people were very much against the war.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I knew enough to make a judgment if he was or wasn't handling it correctly. But I know that a lot of the college students had strong, opinions about what was going on. And
yeah, did you see any of those raids, like those college?
I saw a lot of things on the news about protests at colleges, universities like Kent State, I think. No, was that?
Yeah, it was Kent State.
Yeah, and just a lot of sit-ins and a lot of hippie. But to me, they just looked kind of like a bunch of druggies. That I mean, they may or may not have had a good point, but it was hard to take them seriously when they looked like they were high all the time. And you know what I mean? They didn't seem like they were doing anything super important with their lives. They were just being critical, and they may or may not have been right. But I think that in the end, when you look back, you can see that it doesn't appear that we really set out to win that war. We just it was more of a political thing that was drawn out. If we really wanted to win it, we probably could have just obliterated a whole area and gotten out and had been done with it. But I don't know. Probably looking back, probably we don't know all the details, so it's hard for us to criticize. We don't know all the details he knew and that he had to deal with as the president. So yeah. It's hard for me to say.
And then, so you living in Florida, you probably had, were probably close watching the Castro?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember what year the Bay of Pigs happened, but was it before I was born or when I was very young? I think it was.
I think it was when 1961 or something.
Okay, yeah, but I do know that in Florida there are many Cubans who fled Cuba right when Castro was coming into power, who lost everything, lost their land and their businesses. And
because they were Cuban living in Florida?
They lost everything when the revolution began and Castro took over. And his idea was to take everything from the wealthy and to spread it out and share it with the poor. And so if you had a lot of land or you had a big house and you didn't, weren't supporting him, you weren't in favor of him, then you would have it taken away. And you would be thrown in prison or whatever. So, jeez. Yeah, it wasn't a great time to be a non-supporter of Castro. So the country was kind of in turmoil. A lot of people left and came to Florida. And the people who came to Florida from Cuba that were Cuban hated Fidel Castro. And they, wanted to reclaim their country. But I think that's what led. Were there
a few running around, or did you see a lot?
Oh yeah, there's whole communities of Cuban communities. There's Little Havana. I mean, there's a place in Tampa that's completely Cuban. There's restaurants and shops and cigar stores. Yeah, there's a lot. We had friends, great people.
Yeah.
Cuban.
So, did you have any opinions on what Castro was doing at the time? It was already in communist territory with their previous leader. So, did you have any opinions about Castro?
Well, Castro is the one who turned it into a communist government, and yeah, I think we all had strong opinions of what he was doing to the country. People weren't allowed to leave.
Nobody liked him?
took away their freedoms, and he took away their opportunity to succeed, and their country became very run down and very third world. And people were hungry, people were poor, they were barely surviving, and it was sad. Because it was a beautiful little island, and it went backwards. It has gone backwards.
Yeah, that's sad. Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there any other memories you have from the Cold War you'd like to share?
Yeah, one of the things I really remember that I didn't really realize was part of the Cold War until later was the whole thing with Gandhi. And I didn't really realize that India was trying to gain its independence from England. And many people wanted to do it in a violent way and protest, but Gandhi was trying to lead a nonviolent protest. And he was so talked about and so kind of looked up to when I do remember that quite a bit, that he would have hunger strikes and he would go and travel around the country and speak to people and just get them to try and change things in a nonviolent way. He was a very good man, and I remember that going on when I was a kid and not really realizing the bigger picture.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But anyway, those are most of my memories that I can think of.
Alright, thanks.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. I hope it helps.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.